Hello and welcome back to What If Ash's Red Sun, Part 3. So, we'll start off where Ash is talking to Professor Oak about Golduck's disobedience and asking for some advice, since Red had set him on a challenge not to ask him for advice. So then, Oak would begin to tell Ash a story about when once Red went to a place called Grandpa Canyon, where he found a very young Aerodactyl hatchling, and he took it as his own Pokemon. When it grew up, it disobeyed him as it didn't respect him, but as time went on, it began to realize that it should listen to Red as it is his Pokemon and he cares about it. So he would then just give Ash advice that he should just let Golduck grow and realize how much Ash cares for it, and that it should listen to him. And Ash, understanding the advice, would listen. As then, the events of the Primate episode would go differently, as instead of Ash getting Primate, it would be Brock getting it as a Mankey. The reason why I made this decision is because in too many of my what ifs, Ash has a Primate / Mankey, so I wanted to give it to somebody else. So then, we'll go into the episode or the events of the Erica episode, where Ash meets Erica for the first time. So, because Misty wasn't travelling with Ash, they won't go to the perfume shop, but Erica would come and greet Ash and Brock as they were going to the gym, as Ash would be smitten, as Brock would be smitten with her. As then Ash would smell perfume, as he would then say, "My God, what's that? What's that artificial dumb smell?" This would immediately offend Erica. As then she would let Brock in, as she would scowl at Ash. As then Erica would say, "What do you mean?" And then Ash would say, "That stupid smell of perfume, artificial smell. Somebody should just go and take a shower, and then they shouldn't smell. People who take perfume smell." And this would absolutely enrage Erica, as she would do something that I'm pretty sure would land most people in jail in the real world, but this is the Pokemon world, as she would assault Ash with her little thing, she would push Ash out of the gym and would put a cross on his face in her rage, as she would then leave, as then Ash would get back up. Without Team Rocket, he would come up with his own plan to sneak in, as he would climb up and would sneak into the building from, as you see in the image, that little middle area of the Valplume flower thing. He would climb inside there and sneak through, as he would then make his way into the gym's battlefield, where he would meet Erica. Erica would prepare to kick him out of the gym, but Ash would say he's not going to take nonsense anymore. He wants his gym badge. If he loses, he'll never come back and will never bother Erica and her Pokemon again. But if he wins, she must respect him and give him his badge. As then Erica would say, "Where you look familiar. You're exactly like that kid, like that guy Red came in being all quiet and edgy and rude about perfume. My God." And then he absolutely annihilated me with his blasted Charmeleon. Anyway, that guy's now the champion, and there's nothing I can do about it. As Erica would be scowling, remembering Red, so Ash would recognize the person she was talking about as his dad. As then Ash would use Fear against a Tangler. Tangler would try use Constrict, which would quickly be avoided by Fear using Aerial Ace. As then Tangler would use a Stun Spore, which would paralyze Fear. Fear wouldn't be able to land lots of attacks, which would give Tangela the opportunity to absorb most of its health with Mega Drains. As then, finally, Fira, realising what was happening to it, would then break through the paralysis and use an air release, knocking out Tangela. As then, Erica would send out her Weeping Bell. Weeping Bell would use multiple Vine Whips, which would do lots of damage over time. As then, Fira would use an aerial ace or two, which would also do a lot of damage. As then, Weeping Bell would use a Razor Leaf as Firo coming for an air release, but at the last second, Firo would be overtaken by the paralysis as the Razor Leafs crit Firo for a lot of damage, knocking out Firo. As then, Ash would send out his trusty Bulbasaur. Bulbasaur would then launch a powerful Solar Beam, which would do a lot of damage to Weeping Bell. Then Weeping Bell would respond with a Razor Leaf, which would send Bulbasaur back. But Pokemon would clash with Solar Beams, which would do even damage to both sides. As then, Erica will call for Weeping Bell to use a Poison Powder, but this won't affect Bulbasaur at all, as then Bulbasaur will come with a tackle and would knock out Weeping Bell. As then, Erica would send out her Gloom. Gloom would use a bunch of Solar Beams and cuts, which would do a lot of damage to Bulbasaur. Then Bulbasaur would respond with its own Solar Beams and tackles, which would send Gloom back. As then there would be a clash between Solar Beam and Solar Beam. When the dust settled, Bulbasaur was down as Gloom looked like it had no damage on it at all. As then Ash would think this is odd that Bulbasaur would lose so easily to a Solar Beam, as then he would look back at Gloom, as Gloom would be emitting a smelly like aura around it. Ash would quickly cover his nose, as the smell would smell like the sewers. As then he realised that Erica had caught Bulbasaur off guard with a terrible smell, which would weaken the Solar Beam, which allowed Gloom to overtake it. As then Erica would be there smiling. As then Ash would grin as he would hold a Pokeball. As then he would throw out his trusty Charmeleon. Charmeleon would send out a flamethrower, which would send Gloom back for a lot of damage. Gloom would then use a Razor Leaf, which would be quickly avoided by Charmeleon, as would come with a Dragon Claw, which would send Gloom back. As this would leave Charmeleon wide open for Poison Powder, which would poison it. As then Charmeleon would use a Flamethrower, which would send Gloom back. As then Gloom would respond with a Solar Beam, which would do decent damage to Charmeleon. Actually, no, not a lot of damage. As then Charmeleon would be afflicted by the poison. Then Charmeleon would use a Dragon Pulse, which Gloom would avoid, and would use a Razor Leaf. As then Ash would call for a Flamethrower. As then the poison would afflict Charmeleon, as this would slow the Flamethrower down, as Gloom would easily avoid it. Realising that close range attacks were now useless, Ash would call for his Charmeleon to charge in. As then his original intention would be a Dragon Claw, but then flames would appear around Charmeleon's teeth, as it would bite into Gloom, sending it flying back. Ash would recognise this as Fire Fang, as he would then call for Charmeleon to use another one, which would knock out Gloom. As then Charmeleon would be suffering from the poison, as Charmeleon would scream in pain even though it had won the battle. Erica, realising how heartless she was being right now by making a poor Pokemon suffer, would quickly throw Ash a Petra Berry, which Ash would give to Charmeleon, as Charmeleon would devour the Petra Berry quickly. As then Erica would come and give Ash the badge, as she would quickly dismiss Ash from the gym, not having enough decency to apologise to Ash, as she was very angry with his opinion, as in this timeline, Ash had not been as Ash had been a bit more rude about the perfume thing, and also he was not, and also he did not save anything. He didn't save the gym, so this would leave Erica with a bitter taste in her mouth. Unlike in Journeys, when she saw him again, she was happy to see him, and in the original one, she was happy to welcome him. And when she was happy to say goodbye to him and give him the badge, she wouldn't be. But anyway, to move on to the topic of this slide, would be the Pokemon Grand Prix. Ash would participate, not Ash, Brock would participate with his Mankey. Mankey would use a low kick, which would send Machop to the ground, as Machop would punch Mankey in the face with a Mega Punch. Mankey would then come in and would use a Mega Kick on Machamp's core. This would do no damage, as Machamp's abs and pectorals would just absorb the hit like it was nothing. As then Mankey would come in for another Mega Kick, but in Machamp's face. This would hit Machamp, which would annoy it, as Machamp would send Mankey back with a flurry of Mega Punches. Mankey would be very tired, as it would want to win the battle for its trainer Brock, who it respected a lot more than it respected Ash, as it would respect Ash, as Brock was a gym leader and was a bit more of a caring person than Ash was. Even though Ash and Brock were both caring trainers, Brock literally wanted to be a Pokemon breeder, and he's a Pokemon doctor, like currently. So pretty much he's automatically a bit more tuned to be caring than Ash in a general sense, and she literally looked after all of his siblings. Anyway, enough rambling about Brock's career choices and his family, as then Mankey, feeling disappointed, will begin to glow. Not disappointed, but wanting to win it for his trainer will begin to glow as he will grow in size and evolve into Primeape. Primeape would dash at the champ and would kick it in the face with a Mega Kick and would finish it off with a Mega Punch, which would knock out Machamp. As then Primeape would quickly move through its next round, as it would go to the final match against Anthony. Anthony and his Hitmonchan would try hit Primeape with a flurry of Mega Punches. Most attacks would be dodged, but one would hit Primeape right in the face, which would really annoy it, as then Primeape would use a Mega Kick, which would send Hitmonchan back. But Hitmonchan would just jump right back up, as it would be jumping, as it would taunt Primeape by using its boxing glove to intimidate it. As then Primeape would come in with a Mega Punch, which would barely graze Hitmonchan, as Hitmonchan would attack it with a Fire Punch. As then Mankey would sweep Hitmonchan's leg with a low kick, as then Hitmonchan would be sent to the ground, as then Pokemon would get right back up. As then it would be a clash between Mega Punch and Mega Punch, as then this would turn into an all-out kickboxing match, as Primeape would land a Mega Kick, as Machamp would land a Mega Punch, as Primeape would land a Mega Punch, as Hitmonchan would also land a Mega Punch or Fire Punch, as both Pokemon were tired, as both trainers would decide that it was time to end this with 2 Mega Punches on both sides. As when the dust settled, Primeape was standing victorious, as Hitmonchan was down. The reason why I had Primeape win was because as good as Anthony's Hitmonchan is, I'm not gonna lie, when I first saw like that Grand Prix battle against Team Rocket and the other guys Hitmonlee that they stole, like the way that Hitmonchan was was just overtaken by Team Rocket, and the way that Primeape was just able to just dominate Hitmonlee without even trying just told me that Primeape was just a stronger Pokemon. No matter which trainer Primeape was given to, I pretty much say that Primeape would win against Hitmonchan 9 times out of 10 in my opinion. So yeah, Brock and Primeape won the Grand Prix, as then Brock would go and tell Anthony to go back to his family that he unfortunately abandoned for a Pokemon boxing and martial arts and fighting championship that he was never going to win in the first place. Let's be real here. So Anthony would go back to the people who love him, as Brock and Primeape would leave with a championship in the Grand Prix. As then Ash would go and battle Koga. As then Ash would use 3 of his most trained Pokemon, not 3 but 2 of his most trained Pokemon against Koga, as it wouldn't be Charmeleon, as he wanted to give it a break. He would use Graveler against Venomoth. Venomoth would go for lots of side beams, which Graveler would curl up into a ball and would hit lots and lots of rollouts, so a lot of damage. But Venomoth would continuously try and resist with side beams, but in the end Graveler would strike true with a rollout, knocking it out, as then Cougar would send out his Golbat. Golbat would hit with a lot of Steel Wings, which would gradually do a lot of damage to Graveler. And since Cougar was a ninja and had trained his Golbat to be more of a ninja, Golbat would begin to avoid a lot of Graveler's moves, as Graveler would use Rock Blast, avoided easily, Rollout, avoided easily, as then Graveler would get tired after a while, as then Golbat would use lots of Steel Wings, which would whittle Graveler down, as it would then use a point blank Sludge Bomb, which would poison Graveler. Graveler would barely be standing, as it would be afflicted by poison, as it would use a rollout against Golbat's Steel Wing, and Steel Wing would easily win out, as Graveler had been weakened so much. Ash would return Graveler and would say, "You did well, buddy." So would then send out his Raichu. Raichu would shock this PD Golbat with a Thunderbolt, as then Golbat would try coming for a Sludge Bomb, which would be avoided, as then Raichu would use a Quick Attack, which would send back Golbat, as then Golbat would try use another Sludge Bomb, which would be countered by a Thunderbolt, which would overtake the Sludge Bomb, which would knock out Golbat. As then Cougar would give Ash the Soul Badge and would congratulate him on the win, as he will point Ash to the direction of Grandpa Canyon, as Grandpa Canyon was quite near to the ports that would lead to Cinnabar Island, as then Ash will remember what Oak told him about Grandpa Canyon. And the events of Attack of the Prehistoric Pokemon would happen. But it's gonna be similar but different, as then Ash and Brock will go to collect some fossils on prehistoric Pokemon, although it's Gary also trying to do the same thing. So a little backstory on Ash and Gary's rivalry. So Gary wouldn't really look down at Ash, or more like kind of resent him. He would kind of still look down at him because he'd think that he's a disgrace to Red's legacy, but he would kind of dislike and resent him because his older brother, who is blue in this timeline, had went and challenged Red in the finals of the Indigo Plateau, and Red had beaten him in a humiliating way. Blue had a Blastoise, and and Red had a Charizard, and Charizard easily defeated Blue's Blastoise. That humiliated Blue, and by the transit of property, since Ash was Red's son, Gary disliked Ash because of how his brother had just been dominated by Red. Even though Blue had rematched Red many times in the Indigo Plateau when Red had become champion, Blue just wasn't able to catch up, and it made the Oaks look weak in comparison to Red and the Ketchums. Even though Professor Oak had no problem with Red Ketchum being superior to his oldest grandson, Blue Oak, it was quite the contrary for Gary Oak / Gary, who really didn't like that. So Gary would say, "Oh, look who's here, son of the guy who cheap shotted the Indigo League." As then Ash would say, "What's your problem, Gary? You still saw that my dad beat your brother?" So Gary would get mad. As then he would say, "Anyway, not nearly as good as your dad, Ash." As then Ash would say, "True, but I'm building up to him." As then Ash would challenge Gary to a battle, as Gary would say, "I don't have time for wannabes like you, Ash." As then Ash would say, "Oh, what's wrong? You're scared that you're gonna lose to me like your brother lost to my dad?" This comment would get Gary very angry, as he would say, "Oh really? Let's have a Pokemon battle." As then Brock would step aside as Ash would send out Charmeleon against Gary's Wartortle. Gary would pick up the Charmeleon a little bit different, as he would say, "Oh, what's wrong with Charmeleon? Is it sick?" As then Ash would say, "No, it's fine. It's just a bit different and special, unlike your Wartortle." This comment would also get under Gary's skin, as he would go for a Hydro Pump full power. Wartortle would oblige, as this wouldn't do as much damage to Charmeleon as Gary thought it would, as when Gary pulled out his Pokedex, the Pokedex would say that Ash's Charmeleon was a Charmeleon, but its typing wasn't just fire. It was fire and dragon. This would surprise Gary, but Ash had known about this for a while, as then Gary would come in with his Coal Bash, which would hit Charmeleon. So Charmeleon would respond with a Dragon Claw, which would do even damage to Wartortle. As then Wartortle and Charmeleon would hit each other with Flamethrower and Hydro Pump. This would do even damage to both Pokemon, as they would send each other back, both a bit exhausted. As then Ash would use Dragon Pulse against Wartortle, as then Wartortle would come in with a Mega Punch, which would send Charmeleon back. Both trainers would then decide that they want to end this with a clash between Dragon Pulse and Hydro Pump. This would cause a massive explosion, bigger than the last one, as the explosion would cause the ground to crack and cause a gaping hole, which would cause Ash, Charmeleon, Gary, Wartortle and Brock to fall down into a very dark cave, where they'd be surrounded by mad prehistoric Pokemon that had been disturbed from their nice slumber. Gary and Ash with Brock would be looking around, a bit intimidated by the situation that they got themselves in. As then they would hear a scream, "Aerodactyl!" As then Aerodactyl would come flying through, as it would rest on a rock, as when it came flying through it would scratch Charmeleon's forehead, which was annoying, as Charmeleon would glare at Aerodactyl. Aerodactyl would glare at Ash and Charmeleon, as he would want to fight them. Ash would be confused, as then he would remember that Red had taken a hatchling from Grandpa Canyon. This must have been Aerodactyl's child. As then Aerodactyl would begin to come at Ash and Charmeleon with a wing attack, which Charmeleon would block with a Dragon Claw, which would send both parties back as Gary and Brock and Wartortle would stand aside. As then Charmeleon and Aerodactyl glare at each other. As then Aerodactyl would take to the skies higher. As then Charmeleon would try hit it in the skies with, not to the skies, but try hit it in the air with lots of Dragon Pulses and Flamethrowers, which would promptly be avoided by Aerodactyl. As then Aerodactyl would use an ancient power, which would send Charmeleon back for a lot of damage. As then Aerodactyl decided that it wanted to get revenge on the Ketchum family, would fly and would pick up Ash, essentially kidnapping him. As then Charmeleon would grab onto the tail of Aerodactyl, as it would fly up to the surface. As Aerodactyl would throw Charmeleon down to the surface, as it would hold Ash up in the air, as it would throw Ash up and would get ready to eat him. As then Charmeleon would get very angry, as it would scream and glow, as it would grow in size, as it would grow wings, as the bone on its head would expand into 2 bones, as it would become more dragon-like, as it would then roar Charizard, as it would have evolved into a Charizard. It would immediately take to the skies and would slash Aerodactyl with a Dragon Claw and would put Ash on its back, as it would then battle Aerodactyl in the sky with Dragon Claws and Flamethrowers, as it would try hit Aerodactyl with a flurry of Flamethrowers, which only one would hit, so it would then slash it with a Dragon Claw. Aerodactyl would then respond with an ancient power, which would be avoided. As then Charizard would grab Aerodactyl by the tail and spin it and throw it and finish it off with a powerful Dragon Pulse, which would knock it out. As then we'd see Gary and Brock jumping out of the massive hole with the assistance of Gary's Dodrio. As then Gary would return Dodrio and Ash would get off his Charizard. As then Ash would say, "Charizard, thank you for saving me. It's so cool that you evolved." As then Charizard would smile at its trainer. As then Gary would be angry and intimidated by the presence of Charizard. As then Ash would say, "So Gary, want to continue the battle?" As Gary would say, "No. This isn't any place for a battlefield. Are you really stupid enough to battle in such a damaged area?" As then Ash would say, "You're kinda right. You don't have to be such a jerk about it." As then, even though Gary acted like he didn't want to battle because of collateral damage, the truth was he didn't want to battle because he knew that Charizard would demolish any of his Pokemon at this point. So he would just want to go and train his Pokemon. As Gary would quickly take his leave, as Brock would say, "Now that's amazing, Ash, that Charizard evolved and defended you. Now I think it's time that we move on to Cinnabar Island." As then, on their way there, the events of the episode Bulbasaur the Mysterious Garden would happen. But the only difference is that Bulbasaur would evolve. The reason why I'm having Bulbasaur evolve into Ivysaur is honestly because I believe the only reason that it refused was because it was scared that when it evolved, it would go through kind of like a rebellious phase like Charizard / Charmeleon did, and would not listen to Ash or be an alpha jerk. So it was scared of that. So it wanted to just take Bulbasaur as I didn't want to go through all that. And since Ash's Charizard is a lot nicer and most of Ash's Pokemon are evolved at least once, Bulbasaur would want to fit in and would be scared of evolution, in my opinion, which would, in my opinion, cause it to evolve into Ivysaur. As then, I think this is the perfect time to leave this episode off. I really enjoyed making this part. You know, it's been fun, like, making this story as a whole. And also, I have so much things planned. And the Charizard image, render, whatever it was, whatever people call it, I made it myself, even though the art looked kind of mediocre. It's the best I can do and the best I can find. So, anyway, I'll see you guys later. Bye.